invited two commissioners in to talk about the case. Bob Spindell is a Republican businessman in Milwaukee, and Jacobs is a Democrat, an attorney also in Milwaukee. Here is part one of our discussion. This case is getting national attention, so I want to give you both just a moment to kind of briefly state your case, your point of view in terms of the voter rolls. Ann, let's start with you.
Well, what's going on was an attempt to remove hundreds of thousands of Wisconsin voters who were registered voters, legal voters in the state of Wisconsin, where a data match said they might have moved. And that was their only sin, as it were, when it came to their voting registration. And what had happened was the Elections Commission had decided that we weren't confident that that many people had actually moved, and sent them a letter that said, you might have moved. If you have, would you please re-register, or else go to the polls and confirm that you haven't moved. That was taken up by a conservative institution who said that we were, I believe absolutely incorrectly, required to deactivate hundreds of thousands of voters based on this information that we just didn't believe was reliable. And that's what the court has stayed. Those voters, as of right now, are staying on the rolls, and we look forward to them being able to exercise their right to vote.
Bob, what's your point of view here?
Well, I think we have to recognize that it's not 200,000 people that actually live at the same address that they are on the registration. We have, from that 240,000, we got at least 60,000 back saying there's no address, no way to forward, and so forth and so on. Some people did call in, but I think we have to remember we're not talking about 200,000. I bet Ann and others $100 that it'll be under 2% of the people that will respond saying, yes, I still live here. So I think we have to remember that. And also, nobody gets deactivated. They can register again on Election Day if so needed. And I've been trying to be very, very flexible with our colleagues on the Election Commission to basically give them anything they want. You know, let's do another 30 days, send them a letter, give them 30 days to respond to that, then deactivate them. We cannot go into this very, very close election with an extra 200,000 people on the voting rolls. It just
Why not? Why do you think?
Well, I think that allows for possible fraud. You can't tell me that in every single human endeavor there's lying, cheating, and stealing except voting. And all the enthusiastic and very aggressive and whatever, both Republicans and Democrats, for this election that's going back and forth, you can't tell me that some of those are not going to take a little extra step to get a few extra votes.
And you can re-register to vote on Election Day, so why is it so important to you to keep these people on the rolls?
Well, for two reasons. One of which is what Bob just said is not true. We have almost infinitesimal fraud in the state of Wisconsin. I think the last numbers I saw was less than 0.01%, 0.01 or 0.001%. Secondly, it's not, what he's saying is somebody is going to go commit a felony in their own name by voting at an address. That doesn't get extra votes. That doesn't change the outcome of the presidential election he's so concerned about. What we're talking about are registered voters who have previously properly and legitimately registered to vote, who are going to stay on the rolls, and if they've moved, they will be able to change it. But if they haven't moved, they're going to be able to walk in and vote. And now to turn to your question. The answer is re-registering to vote requires documents, and they're not necessarily documents all of us have with us when we go to vote. So maybe you are older, maybe you are disabled, maybe you are walking in at the last few minutes of your day to vote, and you get in there and you don't have your documents to vote, to register to vote, you're out of luck. And why are we taking thousands of registered voters off? We've already had 3,000 people respond to us and say, no, 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 I still live at this address. 3,000 people who should not be taken off the rolls have already told us we're wrong. And we shouldn't be disenfranchising thousands of Wisconsin voters. And that's what this is about.
And Wisconsin is a very important state. There's no doubt about that when it comes to elections. How do you think what gets decided
Well, you know,
will affect the
if I could
election.
just answer a question, there is evidence that there is fraud. Detective Mike Sandvik of the Milwaukee Police Department several years ago did a written study on that. There is also no evidence that there isn't any fraud that's going on, and I think that having 200,000 extra people on the rolls, which is a Democratic ploy almost everywhere, it's a Republican-Democratic issue. The Dems like lots of people on the rolls. The Republicans like to have these cleaned up.
But you're obviously deadlocked here. I mean, this is obviously, and this is how the Elections Commission is right now. It's deadlocked. So how do we get this figured out when there's an important election coming up? I mean, when this is obviously a partisan issue.
Well, either you admit the truth of the matter, which is these are not extra names. These are not extra voters. These are real live registered voters in the state of Wisconsin who have a legal right to vote. And if you believe that every voter who wants to cast a ballot should be able to cast a ballot and have it be counted, which should be the mantra of every person advocating on elections, then these people belong on the rolls unless and until they either register somewhere else or are allowed to vote at their address. They're not extra names.
Is there any kind of compromise here on the Election Commission? I mean, is there any middle ground?
Well, I think we should do what the League of Women Voters suggested, to send a card out which has all the information. The Election Commission made a terrible error when they sent the postcard out, not putting in the consequences of not responding within 30 days. Ann said the other day at the meeting that even in 2021, she's not ready to take anybody off the rolls, where the Election Commission in June, I guess it was, before my time, agreed to give them 2 years to decide whether or not somebody lived there. These are people that are probably alive, but they've moved. They have maybe some, I'm sure some have died. They're not there. So this, again, in this close state, and please remember, Bush only lost the state by 6,000 votes in 2000, and this could be a very close election, and we don't have any room for having huge numbers of people on the voting rolls that should not be there.
So, Ann, I'm curious where we go from here.
Where we go from here? Mr. Spindell just told you something untrue. He said he thinks they've died. That is untrue. Those persons who are getting these mailers that we sent out have already been culled for people who have passed away. People who pass away, we get notice of and we remove from the rolls. These aren't dead voters, they're not Chicago voters. They are Wisconsin registered voters. And secondly, I would point out that the lawsuit involved that Mr. Spindell volunteered to be a plaintiff in, and then
I didn't volunteer to be a plaintiff. I recommended that they do it.
Recommended that they file this lawsuit, didn't recommend that they follow the second half of the statute they think is involved, which says re-register anybody who's moved within a city. If this was really about cleaning up rolls, if this was really about the veracity of these rolls, they would have asked in this lawsuit that people be both deactivated under the statute and re-registered if they've moved within a municipality. Interestingly, they didn't ask for the second part, which tells you this is about disenfranchising people, not cleaning up the rolls.
They did at the Ozaki County hearing, which I attended on Monday. They did.
They changed their mind.
They said that everybody that moves within the city should be re-registered, and I agree 100%.
I mean, is that one of the problems? Do we know specifically who's on this more than 200,000?
That's why we send a letter. That's why we send a letter to everybody asking, please respond if you're still at this address.
Coming up, part 2 of our debate on the voter rolls case and a very sharp exchange over a judge's decision to hold the Democratic commissioners in contempt.